Hi everybody and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays, a special edition. I was just with Lily Ray talking about Google updates from 2021 and what's going to be happening in 2022. Now we're going to talk about your website as a knowledge graph and the web of data with Doreid and Ryan. And you get the song, despite yourselves. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Doreid and Ryan.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's obligatory now. I have to do it. So welcome, everybody. We don't have Anton with us today, so any questions in the chat, I'm going to try to deal with them, but please do forgive me if I don't do a very good job. I will try and put them up on screen as we go through. The plan for today in this Wordlift monthly roundtable, December 2021, is to talk about modern SEO means moving from a web of pages, also web pages, to the web of data. This was Doreid's idea for a title, so he has been forced to do a presentation. Ryan, if I understand correctly, you're an absolute genius with this stuff, according to Doreid.
Well, I definitely use it quite a bit. It's definitely at the cornerstone of a lot of things that we do here at the agency.
Brilliant. And Doreid, you work at Wordlift, and you've been working in this for years, and you're very geeky, aren't you?
Yeah. I still remember, the first time when I meet Andrea Volpini. So I believe it was about like 4 years ago. In the office at the Midtown of Rome. So he was speaking to me about those stuff. So he was showing me a backend of a WordPress website with a slider bar on the right side. He told me, look, we have this content, and from this content, we can do a lot of stuff. We can do annotations. We can build a structured data semantic web. And at that time, I was working in my previous company, and I used it to do all the classic stuff. So everything related, to on-page SEO, the backlinks, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I say, oh, this looks cool. So to be honest, I didn't understand too much from Andrea, what was explaining to me, but it looks, something very nice. I said, okay, I have to join those guys. So I joined them, and yeah. And it's completely changed my way of seeing SEO.
Right, which is a great point, because we just had this comment from Luke Davis. He's been diving into this the last few weeks. That's his perfect timing. Everything you've learned at Wordlift with Andrea and his team is going to be incredibly useful today, because we're going to be able to dive into this, and you've got a great presentation. I'm going to share the screen to get this kicked off, so that everybody who's turned up, please do tell us where you're from, and I'll pop it up on the screen as and when I can. The other thing I need to manage to do is actually remove this branding from the bottom. There we go. Welcome. Now, Doreid is going to go through three of these points, but we're going to just start really quickly with the first point, which is your website is data set, but it's probably not organized in a way that makes sense for today's SEO. Now, I'm going to start with you, Ryan, about that one. What would you understand by that? Your website is full of data, but Google can't grab it. It can't understand it. It can't crawl it. Can you take that to the next level for me?
Yeah. So, for a lot of us, we've got content, we've got navigational structure, maybe we have sitemaps, things like that. Those traditional ways that we try to organize our content and help the crawlers really find the content we were looking for. But really, when it comes down to our content itself, it's just words on a page. It's a lot of unstructured data. And now the machines today can do some pretty cool things when it comes to structuring unstructured data. But the reality is they don't fully understand or grasp all the concepts always in the perfect way. And if we can organize our content that way, we can actually tell a better story, not just to the users, but also to the machines as well, and make sure that the content itself and the things that we're talking about are disambiguated. But for most of us, our content's not like that. And those machines have to go to a deeper level to really actually understand the context that we're talking about within our content.
Right. Yeah, kind of the idea that we, as human beings, we tend to think that it is kind of organized and structured, and it generally isn't. And the machines might be able to make sense of it, and probably do a great deal of the time, but it doesn't mean to say we can't help them, and by helping them, they will help us. What would you add to that, Doreid?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a kind of make, your website more machine friendly, basically. It's all about seeing your website from the eyes of the search engine. So we try, to organize everything, trying to give, it's a kind of giving the website another sitemap with another dimension, exactly. So rebuilding, I mean, what we have on the website according to this new sitemap, and make it more clear for the search engine by doing a kind of a classification for the content that we have. I mean, as a first step, I'd say always we have two levels. Giving identity to each page we have on the website, then let the search engine understand what are the relations between those two pages, basically, because the relations are crucial. And this is the only way that the search engine can understand what are the relations between, I mean, those stuff. So it could be similar also, I mean, to make it more clear, to the work of internal building links when we do links internally. But instead of using links, because I always say the links are blind, but the relationships with the structured data are much more clear, and they can speak to the search engine, not like the links. The links have one dimension, but the relations, the trust, the structured data, all this stuff, it's, I mean, an awesome way to transmit a huge amount of information for the search engines and make it much more easier and make our site speak to the search engines directly.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Right. So that's a great introduction to the topic that we're going to be going through. And Doreid, you've got a set of slides, and here what I'm now trying to do is show the 3 points that you're going to elaborate on with your slide. Ryan, feel free to pop in with your comments during the presentation. It's not a strict presentation. Number 2, 3, and 4, I'll let everybody read it on the screen. The idea is Doreid's going to go through that, and then we'll finish up with 5 and 6. And Doreid's got some super duper data that he was showing me just before the show that I'm really keen to see. So let's not waste any time. Other than the fact that I've now lost my mouse. Found it again. Off you go, Doreid.
Okay, yeah. So this is, I mean, the workflow usually. So on any website, I mean, the first thing that we do basically is I mean, trying to analyze the whole website. So on any website, I mean, the first thing that we do is analyzing the content. There are some basic stuff that we have almost on all the websites. So all websites, which is, I mean, personal website, local businesses, companies, big corporations, they have this main page. They have the about page, for example. They have, I mean, the services. So those pages, I mean, any website that they have, they need structured data there. So we need the organization entity to be, I mean, injected inside the website. We need to add the about page markup. We need to add the contact page markup. Those are, I mean, ABC of any websites. And almost all of those websites, they have this structure. And also the service pages. So if I am, I mean, a small business, if I'm a big corporation, if I am, I mean, a blogger and I have, I mean, a services, I can add those stuff. I mean, it's very easy. This is almost, I mean, all the websites, more or less, they have this structure. And when we build basically a markup, so after we analyzed and we define these 5-6 pages as, I mean, a first step, we can start building, I mean, the structured data for them. And this is already is a very good step forward, because we already give identity for this stuff, especially for the service markup, which is, I like it too much, because it can also show the search engine, looks, I have this business and this is the area served, for example, right, where I have my services and they are, I mean, provided by me, and those are the services. I can also, I mean, inject the price. So those ABC stuff, they can implement it on any website that we have. So this is the first step, analyzing the content that we have, building this basic stuff, and after we can move forward and see what we have based on the kind of content that we have on our website. So if we move, for example, one slide forward.
Yeah, I mean, really quickly, Ryan, you were nodding your head and saying, yeah, I think what you're saying is a lot of people forget the area served is phenomenally powerful simply because it says where we're actually going to be useful.
Yeah, it's extremely important. I mean, we talk about, there's a lot of, everybody knows about product markup, right? Mm-hmm. You can have product markup and you can add the price for your product and you've got the product carousels and all those opportunities. But for a lot of us who are service-based industries, we can still give a ton of information using services markup. And we get to do everything from the geolocation of where we serve that to the details about the services we provide and some other keywords or other entities that we'd want to attach and link to those. So for us as an agency, that's really helpful, but also a lot of our clients that are services based, we've been able to leverage services markup to, again, just add that extra layer of information to that page and make that content more machine readable. I think Thomas was talking about, that our website, yes, it is a collection of data for machines as well as meaningful content for the users. There's two sides to it for sure. Our content has to speak to the users, but the machines have to read it within the right context so that they can get it to that right user. And services markup's a really easy way to do that when it comes to a company who provides a service. So when we were working with Wordlift and Doreid was helping me with some of this stuff, it was just an eye opener and a no brainer. And for all the services clients we have, it's just one of those basics like the ABC. We need to add this in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think kind of schema markup, philosophically speaking, explaining in Google's native language what it's probably already understood from the page, assuming you've put it in the page, is incredibly important. And the thing that strikes me about area served is sometimes we don't even write it in the page. And what's nice about schema markup is you suddenly realize all the things that you should have said that you didn't. So brilliant, wonderful. Next slide, off you go, Doreid.
Yeah, this is, I mean, a more detailed information about how we can organize our website. So I just take the footer, I mean, from our website to show what we can build, basically. So taking, I mean, a look on the footer of any websites, we already get an idea about what are the information that we can add. So as we are saying, the basic stuff like the about page, the contact page, the service pages, this is something more or less are common between most of the websites. But if we look here, for example, we have the academy, we can add another kind, which is the course, for example. For the blog, we can add the article. For the FAQ, we can add the FAQ page. If we have, open positions, we add the job posting markup. And after, the last thing, which is, we'll take the major work, is creating our knowledge graph. So everything, that we pull out from our website, base it on the entities, and after we will start building this knowledge graph. So the first thing that I will do is adding this basic stuff. So when we have already pages that can be converted directly into entities, so starting from this level, and after moving to the content that we have on our website. So if I have a specific content that can be converted onto entities, when we speak about the entities, we are speaking about very clear concepts, and they are speaking about very specific things. This is the first thing to do. So converting what I already have on my website into an entities, whether it's about page entities, contact page, any other page. Then moving to build the knowledge graph, this depends, of course, on...
Sorry, but before you move on to the knowledge graph, just coming back to that point, I think kind of Ryan can step in as well here. The nice thing about all of these types of pages, once again, it helps us to organize in our own brains what we're actually presenting. And it gives Google a massive clue as to what it's going to find in the page. I focus a lot on about pages for Kalicube because they're incredibly important to explain who you are, what you're doing, who your audience is. And for you, Ryan, the importance of these different pages and spending the time to actually identify what role this page plays. How much does that play into your strategy?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about intent, right, when it comes to SEO, and what is the purpose of each page and the purpose of the content.
Yeah,
and I think there's been a long history of like more is better kind of like thought process in the SEO community, but that's not always the case. You got to have the right pages for the right person at the right time. That's what really creates success. And then making sure that page has the right information. And I think you mentioned that too, Jason. Like when you walk through the markup, you're like, oh, I didn't really add that in the page, but I definitely need to describe that a little bit deeper. I need to add a little bit more about that to make sure that I'm giving both the machines, but really the users as well, the right context. So schema markup is not just something that we put on our page and hope to earn a rich feature. It speaks directly to the search engines in their language, but it also helps us categorize and organize our content and create better content. We always say, what is good content? Well, it's content that's going to move your users in the right direction. It's going to match the intent of what the search engine is looking for. And by doing these just very simple processes, step-by-step processes, to me, it really helps narrow our focus to make sure that we're covering the things that matter, that we're speaking it in the language that our users want, and that we're also speaking in the language that the search engines want and understand as well. So definitely puts parameters around it so that's more focused.
Really specific question for either of you. I don't really mind who answered it, but is it worth using a collection page? Is a collection page a valid thing, for example, for an e-commerce site?
For the category pages, of course. When we have a category pages, we can do this stuff, of course.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. That was a very quick question that will help me in my work as well. So, sorry, Doreid, I cut you off when you were about to launch into the knowledge graph, which struck me as a massive topic. So it would be good to get some clarification around the page types. Building your knowledge graph with your Wordlift vocabulary, from what I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is massive, but I mean, we will try just to make it simple without going too much in details. But this is, I mean, very important stuff. So when we want to build knowledge graph, it depends, of course, on the industry where we are, I mean, operating. So, for example, when we have, I mean, a website like Wordlift, I mean, I weight a knowledge graph more related to the SEO, to the semantic SEO, to the AI technologies for this stuff there. So when we start building, I mean, this knowledge graph, basically, we are not, I mean, giving only just annotations or enriching on the structured data that we have, but we are letting the search engine understand the relations between these different stuff that we have on our website. So it's a kind of glossary that represents all the important information that we have on a page, and after we start building the relationships between those different pieces. For example, if I have, I mean, the entity of WordPress, for example, okay? I mean, I can build it. If I have a page that speaks about this WordPress, I can build the entity. And after, when I start annotating this entity on the different articles, I start building this kind of network the search engine can understand. So I can understand that 10 articles speaking about this entity. So this is, for example, a very important entity. And in this way, basically, it works. I mean, a kind of semantic SEO, building a relationship between the different stuff that we have on our website. And in addition to the structured data that we are adding, basically, I mean, when we have an article, for example, markup, and inside the article markup, we are mentioning, for example, the different entities. In addition to this stuff, we are creating what we call the data set of our website. I mean, just to make it, I mean, more clear, I mean, I'm just going to share the screen and show, I mean, this is stuff, how it works to explain the ideas after, I mean.
For the,
yeah.
For the next slide, you mean?
For this slide as well, yeah.
Right, okay, because mine isn't playing, which isn't fair.
Yeah, so
one of the limitations of StreamYard, I do apologize to everybody, but Doreid, yeah, share your screen, go ahead.
Exactly. So let me share my screen here.
And one interesting point we've had along the way is one piece of advice for everyone to do a taxonomy of your content. Organizing the content in the form of a knowledge graph is more easy when we begin with a taxonomy. I think kind of, once again, it is this thing, schema markup for me at least. Once I start thinking about it, I start organizing because I realize I haven't done it. And that taxonomy stage is something I think a lot of people miss. There you go. Doreid, you're now on screen.
Yeah, exactly. So if we have, I mean, a simple article like this one, for example, so from this article, basically, I mean, we can start annotating the entities. For this is, I mean, an article speak about the structured data. And when we have entities like schema.org, for example, or the rich snippets or all this stuff, we are adding all this annotation within the article, so the search engine can understand that when we speak about this topic, we have this stuff that we have here. So each one of these entities has a unique ID, and it has, I mean, it's positioned in the knowledge graph. So this is basically, I mean, it's adding a lot of value. And for the machines, the machine will understand something similar to this stuff that we have here. So for example, when we add the structured data on an article, we are giving also the search engines many entry points where they can understand the information that we have on the website. So for example, as we see here, this is, I mean, an article speak about how to make your SEO friendly machine readable entities, for example, this is stuff here. But in addition to the article markup that we have, the search engine can pull out all these entities from this article. So everything related to the knowledge graph, to Wikidata, to the linked data, the search engine optimization, the Google knowledge graph, all this stuff can be pulled out from this markup, from this simple article markup. And this is what creates the data set that the search engine likes too much. This is, I mean, the way how we can represent it. So this stuff, for example, here has been built with a model that can show the data set that we have on our website, for example. So when I search the structured data, for example, like this one here, this is the entity, I can pull out and I can understand how this entity is connected with the rest of my website. So you see, for example, here, when I choose the structured data, it tells me, looks, the nearest entities to this structured data entity are, for example, Gennaro Cofone, because I mean, here's our business developer, and he writes too much about the structured data, for example, so we see it here. And after we see other stuff like the metadata, the user experience, the JSON-LD, Google, the semantic web. So this stuff is pretty, I mean, huge from the SEO point of view, from the value that can add for the pages, because this is what the search engine understands. And
Right.
from this data here, I mean, I can also see what I am missing, for example. So if I look, for example, to the data that I have here, I see that I'm missing, for example, some stuff related to the product structure data or the local business structure data, because it could be also useful to add. So I can also start linking this entity and start mentioning the same entity on the other articles. So I can also bring these links and these relations also for the other articles. This is one thing. The other thing that we can do, I mean, once we have this structure, we can also start analyzing our website based to the entities itself. So, for example, I'm going to show you something that we did on Google Data Studio on a publisher website. For example, here, with this configuration that I have here, I can pull out from my website the different entities. So, for example, here we have a publisher website. And I can select, for example, the entity, and from the entity, I can see how this stuff is moving, basically. So it can give me also, I mean, another level of analyzing the data that I have. For example, if I'm a publisher, I can see, looks, for the United States, I've been having this traffic, and I see that it has been increasing, for example, on the 7th of December, and after it came back. So we can also analyze the website based on the entities, based on the concept that we have. And this is very different, basically, from the static way of analyzing the websites by using only the pages, for example, or any other, I mean, metrics that Google Analytics can give. So from here, I can see the entity, and from the entity, I can pull out all the related articles where this entity has been annotated.
Right, which is incredibly powerful insights if we're talking about topicality and entities in general, which is what we really should be talking about. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I was. This stuff's really interesting, and I like the fact that, you know, bringing in like the gaps, right? As I've been running some of these models based on one of the blogs that Andrea just recently did on my own site. You know, it was really eye-opening, saying, okay, you know, we're missing some pieces here in these certain topics that we need to actually build the content up, maybe we need new content, maybe we just are missing the links and the relationships. I mean, that's the huge part, I think, about the knowledge graph in and of itself. Having the entities alone are great. They're great to mark up, they're great to add extra information, but it's really the relationships between those entities that create new meaning. And those are what help us really take it to another level with our content, and trying to explain that to a client too, you know, because a lot of times when we start talking about structured data and knowledge graphs, clients' eyes start to kind of glass over a little bit. But I start to talk about, well, this is the relationship, and these are, you know, all these entities we talk about are multidimensional, and they've got different attributes, and those attributes also link to other things that are conceptually relevant. And I mean, just look at any data, any SERP today within Google, and you can clearly see all the related concepts and all the related topics and all the other attributes that they're looking at when you're making a specific query. And as we're also starting to see with, you know, MUM and the new rich features coming in, where we've got, you know, expand this topic or narrow this search, right? I've started to see that pop up on a number of queries. And that's getting us thinking we have to think more topically, and we have to think about the relationships between the entities within our topics. And by adding that structure, it gives more meaning. When you give more meaning, the crawlers like you more, and that can hopefully end up in higher rankings, more traffic, and all those great things that we're all trying to do.
Right. Yeah, and as you said, kind of Google's understanding the topics and the attributes and digging down. And Thomas made the point that taxonomy is a great way for doing your internal linking or improving your internal linking. So, Doreid, back to you for the next slide.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I mean, something I partially explained in the when I'm sharing the screen. So this is, I mean, when we see the analytics stuff. So when we have this semantic analysis that allow us to analyze the traffic based on the entities. On the other side, I mean, we can do a lot of stuff with the data set that we already have. So once we have this knowledge graph that has been implemented, we can also kind of clustering the information that we have on our website according to these entities. So as Ryan was explaining, basically it's all about the relations between the different articles or different pieces of information that we have on our website. So here, for example, we see a widget, and from the widget, for example, this has been built for WordPress. I can improve the user experience based on the entities. So if I'm interested, for example, in WordPress, or if I'm interested in the linked data, I can just click, for example, this tag in this faceted search, and after I will find the stuff related exactly to this topic itself. This is something, I mean, can be done using the data set. And the same data set, it can be used in many other ways, because in addition to adding another entry point for the search engine where they can collect that data, we have some clients that they use the dataset to build applications, for example. So you can use this same knowledge graph for other purposes, in addition to improving the SEO, and it can create also many other entry points. So we can, I mean, imagine that the dataset is something where all information are stored and can be used in many other ways. One thing that also Ryan was mentioning, which is also cool to do, we can do a kind of on-page SEO based also on the entities. So I will share my screen again to discuss the same example that we've been speaking about. I mean,
yeah, one thing you just said, just before we carry on, is building a knowledge graph for your website isn't just about SEO, because it actually gives you a great deal of flexibility and power in terms of your content for your users, but potentially other users as well. Before we move on with what you were going to talk about, Ryan, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, so you've got like the widgets, which I like within Wordlift, but you can also build your own, because you have, once you build a knowledge graph, you have this massive data set, right? And you can reuse that. Now search is great. I'm obviously, I love SEO. I've been in the SEO community for quite a long time. But the reality is that you can take this data set and continue to build on it, to reuse it, to repurpose content. We do a lot of natural language work with our sites as well, to help us see maybe gaps in our content, and then content that we need to maybe create more of. So we use the knowledge graph too, to see those connections, and maybe to see missed connections or deeper elements within the data. I mean, I don't know how to build applications. I'm not even going to pretend. I'm really good at copy and pasting code. That's my skill set. But we can take those endpoints and do so much more, and really enable a deeper level within the customer journey. People like to get more, like, they came to your site for a specific topic. If you're able to help them go deeper, that's going to increase their time on your site. It's going to increase the engagement with your brand. And whether or not dwell time or whatever it is part of the algorithm, let's just talk about the user itself and saying they're spending more time, they're building trust with your brand, which means they may lead now to a conversion, which is obviously what everybody's after at the end of the day, is growing their business with conversion. So the data set helps us build those types of applications so we can customize the journey for each of those users to make sure that they get what they're really looking for.
Brilliant. Ooh, knowledge graphs give us a great deal of flexibility and power. How delightful. So, Doreid, are you going to carry on with your next point that I interrupted you so rudely on? You wanted to share your screen. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just one thing related to Ryan was saying. I mean, I believe the qualification of the user intent is pretty huge using the structured data. And I remember that I was working too much on this stuff with my friend Matteo Cassese, who been using also Wordlift for quite some time, and we spent much time to see how we can improve this knowledge graph. And some weeks ago, he told me, "Look, I have a huge drop inside with the organic traffic on my website." But in the same time, I noticed this drop. I noticed, a huge, increase in the conversion rate. And finally, some days ago, he tweets, he said, finally, Google has understood my business, because this is the point. So even that he lost the traffic on the website, finally, the search engine has understood what he's doing, which was, what not easy to explain. And the conversions were very, very, very high. So this is the point, basically, that we want to arrive to. Coming back to what we've been sharing, let me come back here.
Right. No, it is really important. I was talking to Lily Ray about this topic, or similar topic, and that idea that Google's got the intent and it just needs to match the intent to what you're actually offering is incredibly important. Volume of traffic doesn't measure whether or not the users you're getting are actually valuable to you, and you can be valuable to them. And it's a mistake a lot of people make, is associating high volumes of traffic with profitability, and that isn't necessarily the case. Are you okay with your screen there, Doreid?
Yeah, I'm showing my screen again.
Oh, right. Okay, brilliant. You can actually leave it up there. I can control the on and off.
Okay, cool, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, here there is something. It's similar to the on-page SEO, but basically this is based on the entities, not the keywords. So all this stuff, for example, I did this analysis on this page, so the page of the structured data. And here, what we are doing is trying to find the entry points for the entities that I need to bring for the page itself. So when we analyze, for example, an entity, a page like this one, based on the content, we can find, for example, the entities that I have to annotate. So this is stuff here, these candidates that we have here. So when I speak on the structured data, for example, maybe I have to speak about the rich snippet. I have to speak about JSON-LD, the RDF, the content marketing. All this stuff are entities can be connected with the structured data entity. And the cool thing here that where we are, bringing this data, we are bringing this data by seeing, first of all, our data set, so everything that we have, and by making a control on the other SERPs. So here, for example, we are analyzing the first top pages, rank it for this keyword on the SERP, and we are pulling out what are the entities from those pages. This is very cool. Then, once we have those stuff here, I'm able also to find what of these entities I have already in my knowledge graph. So for example, here we have data.wordlift, so we know this stuff is already, I have it. But for example, this stuff that we have here, we are not covering it. So maybe it's something worth that I can catch, and I can also bring to my dataset. So my dataset and my knowledge graph will be enriched with the new entities that right now I'm not covering at the moment. So this is the point. So it's a kind of on-page SEO, but based on the entities itself to enrich the knowledge graph, and also to improve the ranking of the pages that I already have on my website.
All right, brilliant. Sorry, I was going to ask you to scroll down the page a little bit, because I remember seeing earlier on that you had Matteo on there, and it just struck me that if you scroll down, we can see that one of the keywords that you have, the entities, is Matteo.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I suddenly thought interesting there is associating people with their specialist topics, and what you were talking about exactly before, communicating to Google what my entity actually specializes in, where I might be helpful to its audience. And that for me is incredibly powerful, and obviously from a very Kalicube perspective, where we're focusing on the entities themselves, the people and the companies, and who they serve and what they can serve them with. Now, Ryan, the other question that occurred to me with all of that was the concept of garbage in, garbage out, i.e. the necessity for us to not think that a tool, however powerful, is going to solve all these problems you'll install and it's going to understand your entire website, because if it could do that, Google would already be doing it much, much better than they are. You actually have to identify these entities and clean your data up and clean your site up, and that's a massive human task.
Yeah, AI is meant to assist us, right, to help us, but AI can only do so much. So it's not a set it and forget it. You don't just put something into your website and go, great, everything's solved. Oftentimes when you do that, you do create a mess. And I've done that plenty of times, right? Mm-hmm. Learning in this journey of leveraging AI. So taking the time and going, okay, does this make sense? And does it make sense for my audience? Right. I think we talked a little bit before. Oftentimes we chase traffic, but not all traffic is created equal. some traffic is garbage. It's not helping you. It just makes you feel good, right? It's a vanity metric. So we have to take time and go through these data sets and go, yes, this makes sense. This should actually apply. And then this is how it applies to my business. These entities, we're connecting them to the linked open web, right? So we're connecting them via same as typically to like Wikidata and DBpedia and all these other places, which is great. But the cool thing about having a knowledge graph and making it open like that is we can add our input into the world of linked open data. But we have to take time to do it well and to provide value, to provide new value. And again, that's only going to help us. If we just install it and go on our merry way, thinking that it's going to make this some magic happen. A lot of clients will say, do your SEO magic. And I have to continue to remind them it's not magic. There's a formula to it. And, we really have to be smart about it. It's cool because it's a combination of both creativity as well as, using, the mathematical and scientific method part of our brains. So by slowing down and doing these analyses that Doreid has shared with us and making sure that, we put in the things that matter, we exclude the things that don't matter. That's really going to help make sure our data set is clean and good. Because we know the biggest problem with the web of data and big data in general is the amount of junk. And we don't need to contribute to the amount of junk. We just need to help contribute to making our site as clean as possible so that the search engines go, oh, yes, that's this brand. This is exactly what they do. These are the people they serve. They're a great choice for this query.
Right. And from what I understand now, what you were saying is avoid also reaching out to all these different topics that you think might be, valuable and bring in those vanity metrics. But in fact, it really is about focusing on what you actually do, what you do well, where you're an expert, which makes total business sense. And we forget it, I think, a lot of the time. So we're now moving into kind of the home straight, as it were, and looking into the last two questions which we had on the presentation. I'll just pop them up there, which is how to feed search engines with your internal knowledge graph and some best practices to optimize your website data set and knowledge graph. So we don't need the slides for those. We know what the questions are. Please, everybody who's here, ask your questions. It's an opportunity to ask Ryan and Doreid, who know absolutely boatloads about this. And you might even want to ask me. I know a little bit too. But Doreid, take it away with how to feed the search engines with your internal knowledge graph, that pragmatic part, which is, I've built my knowledge graph. Now, how do I give it to Google and Bing?
Yeah, exactly. So one thing here, we notice that Google is always more hungry for the data. Once they started with the structured data. Last year they were asking from properties. This year they are asking more, and the next year I know they will ask more. So the point here, trying always to cover much information as we can with our website. So in order to feed the search engines, with all this stuff, the first thing is, as we said, starting with ABC stuff. Starting by giving the search engine all the information about our pages, building the structured data, especially for the first pages that we have. So the about page, the contact page, the organization, all this stuff here, building the structured data, and creating this, initial knowledge graph, and put all this data basically on our website. This is, the first thing. So by adding simply the structured data on our website, then trying, to work more on the relationships with Wordlift. Of course, it's much more easier because we have this knowledge graph and we just do the mentions and we scale this stuff quickly. But the idea is there. Once we have the structured data in place, start working on the relationships and the clustering the content based on the entities that we have, and we have very clear taxonomies. So the search engine can find all this amount of data, and this is the best way to feed the search engines basically with the data that we have.
Right, brilliant. And one thing, Ryan, from my perspective, I remember looking at Wordlift for the first time and getting involved in all this stuff, and it just seemed phenomenally complicated, number one. And number two is, as soon as I started thinking about the entities, the relationships, and trying to put them into form, I got lost down a rabbit hole. Is there an easy solution to that, or am I just going to have to get lost?
I think there's a little bit of a journey. I started my journey with structured data a number of years ago, coming at it from more of a creative side of marketing, and then going, man, this stuff seems important, and I feel like I don't know anything. So I kind of fumbled through it. But I think today there are things that make it easier. Traditionally, if you wanted to build a knowledge graph, you'd build your data set and you'd supply that leveraging, RDFA.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that today, thank God, right? We don't have to go in and build it. Now you can if you want to. But that, we do use Wordlift. And the reason we use it is because it does help simplify it. Because when you're building those entities, now you have to take some time up front, I think, to learn, like, what is an entity? Like what does it actually mean? And how should I build that out? And then what are the relationships that matter? And there probably will be some fumbling around. There probably will be a little bit of work because the tool is Wordlift's great, but it can't think for you. It can't think for your industry. You have to kind of know some of those things off top. Now it will give you suggestions and it will say, hey, based on, let's say you run the annotation tool and it's going to pull some entities. Some of them are relevant, some of them aren't. Doesn't mean you just check all of them because it feels good. And so fumbling through it a little bit. And I think having a base understanding of structured data and slowing yourself down and understanding how the properties work and how schema.org works. I definitely like just, running in there and starting to smash stuff up. But I had to slow my pace down and really narrow in for quite a while and go, okay, here's how schema.org is organized. Here's the properties that really matter. Here's the ones that Google's requiring, but here's other additional data points that I can add to even increase the understanding of the content. So by doing that and taking time to one, learn the concepts, and two, do it right, because there's definitely sites I've had to go back and redo it on because I just kind of smashed in there and like, let's just start marking things up and see what happens. And so I think that's beneficial. And Wordlift handles some of like the NER, right? Now I get nerdy and I want to go build my own collab files and start to see, okay, if I use this model, what entities do I extract? But Wordlift allows us to do it at scale. So that's one, obviously I would recommend it because I use it literally every day. And definitely helps making the building of that process initially much easier.
Right, which actually has this, how do you extract the information like entities and entity relationships? Do you use structured data or do you analyze unstructured data like text? You just mentioned collab models. Can you explain that a little bit? I mean, basically it means you're going and delving out, putting this stuff out and doing your best job. You use Wordlift to do that more simply.
Yeah.
But basically there's initial work done by whatever program or whatever platform you're using, and then you need to clean it up.
Yeah, and I think Wordlift's got a number of examples on the website, like with free files. Like Andrea does a ton of those tutorials over there, and then you can also start to experiment with your own. Like, so we've got our own kind of modified, semantic audit that we run, and we can actually use it with our own Wordlift keys to run audits directly on the website. Or if it's brand new sites that we might not have a lot of information on, you've got TextRaiser, you've got Spacey, you've got a number of other tools out there that can help you at least get started and pull some of that information out as you're building it. And then once you start building your knowledge graph, like I said, Wordlift API and all of that, to kind of get the initial look at things. And we'll also do it on the SERPs itself. So we'll scrape all the content from the search engines. We'll do name entity recognition on that, understand what the confidence level and all of that stuff with the entities, how important they are to the SERPs, and then start to model the content around those. So,
right, brilliant. Because I mean, a lot of people I think are worried about the idea of having to have a developer to do the structured data. I mean, that was true several years ago, but these days, I mean, a lot of tools are writing this structured data. Doreid, I mean, how reliable is that, and how accessible is it to people who don't actually have any development skills?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with the tools, it's much more easier. Basically, I mean, what we do with Wordlift, I mean, we configure all this stuff. Sometimes we left for the editor just some fields where they can put the data, and from the data, they can already automate the process of building the structured data. So this is our goal, basically. So without having any, I mean, development skills, just by creating the data, but just by annotating, we are building the structured data because we are using the natural language processing to analyze the content. So by opening just, I mean, 30 or 40 articles from those articles, basically I can pull out all the relative entities, and by making the clicks, I already, I mean, doing the building of the knowledge graph that I have. Of course,
Right.
Stuff can be also enriched, so I can add for this stuff something new, and then based on this I can pull out the same as and after do the work.
Brilliant. No, absolutely. And well, I mean, that also talking about it, it's a lot of work and a lot of human resources that you need to put in, so a lot of costs. How do you get buy-in from clients for this kind of work, and how would you demonstrate its worth in terms of traffic revenue and it being a worthwhile service? I think you're both going to need to answer this. We'll start with you, Ryan.
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I show the clients all the missed opportunities within the search results. I just say, look, today's search results are not just a bunch of blue links. In fact, you've got so many ads now at the top, and then you usually got a featured snippet. In a lot of cases, you're seeing people also ask under that. So like position 1 is below the scroll today. And when you start to bring that up to the clients, and then you start to say, well, look what else is showing. We've got video, we've got images showing up. We've got related content. We've got people also ask questions. We've got all of these different attributes that are showing up, and your site's not showing up there. You don't have any of that visibility. Look at the difference between your SERP listings and those of your competitors. And then we do show them the data. We've got a number of different data points and data cases where as soon as we've done this, within 3 months, we're seeing a 30% uplift, right, in the traffic. And we can directly attribute that back, using, we can do models and stuff too. We can use causal impact to say, look what happened. These, we try to take into account all the other fluctuations. So that's a quick way to do that. And most SEO tools today will show you all the featured, all the rich features that you can rank for a specific term. And if they're not ranking for them, structured data starts there. And then you start to talk to them about the concept of entities. And that Google this isn't new. Google started this back in 2013, really, right? That's was the official launch with Hummingbird. And as you look at the search results, I'll walk them through them and I'll say, okay, we looked up this query, but look at all the other terms that are highlighted. Look at all the other related concepts that are showing up. First off, you don't have content about that, and then you're not creating relationships. So how is Google supposed to know? And we just start to educate them on the process. And as they start to see how valuable they are. And the other thing is, I tell people this all the time, I drink my own Kool-Aid. We do this exact same stuff with our website. And so I can show them, I'll go, okay, this is what we're known for. And I'll do a search and they'll see our listing, and they'll see our videos, they'll see our images, and they'll see our brand owning almost the entire SERP. And they'll go, I want that. And I say, okay, if you want that, you have to do this. So we start to try to give real world examples for them. Today, now we have people that are like, hey, can you do for us what you did for that brand? Because they're seeing it, so.
Well, that's brilliant. Well, really well said. And I mean, Thomas is saying, he thinks it's got great potential. I think we all agree on that. And so, Doreid, the same question phrased slightly differently. How can I convince my stakeholders that it works well? Do you have a case that show that this SEO is useful? I mean, so basically, is there something we can go out and show, a specific case study or a site to visit or resources?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have different cases. Just go, to our website, for example, the footer, you can find the case studies, and we have, case studies from different sectors, from the e-commerce websites to the travel sector, to the retail. So we have a lot of case studies, and in each one we have a different cases. So in each one we have a knowledge graph that has been built, and it has been, used for different purposes, and the results are great. One of the, nice things that we found finally, which is, was a little bit strange, but it shows us, how important the structured data is for the SEO. We find that on one website, we've been building the structured data, and inside the structured data, we were mentioning some URLs that has been blocked by the robots.txt. So Google basically wasn't indexing this stuff because we are preventing the indexation, the crawling of these pages with the robots.txt. But after we decided, we find that on Google Search Console that Google has started crawling this stuff. Even we told him don't crawl this stuff. Why? Because it was there in the structured data. So it was, a little bit strange, right? Why Google is doing this? Because basically, when we use the structured data, we are providing this a huge amount of information. So Google, they bring it into consideration, and it changed the way they look to the website. So the results were arrived there, of course.
Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. I'm coming back to what you were saying earlier on, Ryan. I do brand SERPs. That's my thing. What appears when somebody searches your exact match brand name or personal name. And that idea of, my approach now to SEO is the brand SERP represents Google's understanding of who you are, what you do, and which audience you serve, and what's going to be interesting for them, videos, images, whatever that might be around your brand. And a really good approach, strategic approach, is to say, let's make that brand SERP absolutely perfect, represent our brand as we want to be represented to our audience, and then build out from there. Because if you've created the content that's relevant for your audience, Google will put it on your brand SERP. And if it's relevant to your audience, it's then going to naturally be able to spread out into the other results. And from my perspective, this last year, I've been getting more and more into brand SERPs, and I'm absolutely convinced that is a really intelligent business online digital strategy that is perhaps a good way to get people to buy in, to understand that if we can make Google represent us correctly, it means Google's understood us and our audience, and that intent question we were looking at earlier on is pretty much nailed, and that we can build out from there with our knowledge graph. Which brings me to the next question: is people are asking, or what are the things we need to avoid, Ryan? What are the mistakes people make when they start trying to do this? Obviously, we, as you said, we get terribly overexcited. We dive in and we do lots of stuff. What are the mistakes people make?
Overload, for sure.
Ooh.
So that's one of the things that this happened on pages, and I've worked with Doreid with this too. A lot of times we go, okay, well, this is a product page, but we also have services, and we've got an FAQ and a how-to, and we start to put all of those different markups on the page. And then we start to see some conflictions within our data. We'll run the validator and we start to get warnings, or we start to see, we're just kind of making it too much. So simplifying your process early is, learn from my mistakes, is a much better thing to do. Just because there are a lot of opportunities doesn't mean you should take them all. I think the other thing is assuming that this is a silver bullet is also a mistake. This is a process. And it's a process of building data sets, and it's a process of having that data set crawl. So simplify it and then trust the process. Don't quit, 15, 30 days in because you're not seeing the results. Sometimes it takes, depending on the size of your site, it takes the crawlers quite a while to come back and really start to go, okay, these guys actually know what they're talking about. The process is a big deal. And we've got a number of clients that have been with us a very long time. And it's because I continually show them, even my own journey. When I started out in SEO, like in 2008, 2009, it was a lot easier then, right? You could just like do title tags and keyword metas, and, you could rank overnight. Well, when I relaunched our brand in 2015, things had changed, and I had to be very, very consistent in grinding that work out every day. And it took over a year to really get the ROI. But after I invested all that time and energy in doing these things that are going to matter, that's what laid the foundation to start building on top of that. The same thing happened when we really started structuring our content, building out our own knowledge graphs. It took a few months to really for Google to go, oh, these guys know what they're talking about. So now we're earning things with even in voice search and all of that things that you can do with structured data. But simplify first. You don't have to do it all at once. That's going to give you much more success in the long run. You can always add. It's much harder to start taking things away.
Absolutely brilliant. A really good point. Start simple and build up from there. But also the fact that it takes Google time to crawl and index the website, and then it takes Google time to actually believe and understand and be confident it's correctly understood what it is you're communicating. So don't expect it to be overnight. Doreid, what are your top tips for either making it brilliant, wonderful, or not messing it all up, or both?
Yeah, as Ryan was saying, so it's a process. And it's similar to the EAT, concept. So when people work about their EAT, it's the same stuff. You are bringing the structured data to make Google understand our website and make Google believe in our website. And to get this right user intent, we need to qualify, the traffic. So it's a process. It takes time, but of course it's worth, all the effort, because it can give this a huge amount of information where there is no way to provide this stuff. There's no way more easier than building structured data and knowledge graph to communicate this huge amount of information that cannot be done in the classic way.
I absolutely love Google needs to believe. That is a brilliant way of putting it, because it really does. It's like a child. It needs to believe in you. It needs to believe you, and then it will start playing the game with you, as it were. And I really want to finish with this question, because I was actually thinking about it earlier on. Is Gary Illich is saying, I can dream one day, expect one day, maybe Google won't need schema markup. And Daniel's asking, will Google want to move away from schema once its algorithms become more intelligent? Basically, are we wasting our time, and shouldn't we just sit back and wait for Google to figure it all out?
So AI only works when it has data and it's continually learning. The only way these algorithms are going to get smarter is by having structured information. That really does help. Like, yes, they can understand structured data, unstructured data, but the structured information really helps. I've seen Google double and triple down on schema over the last few years. They're continually adding more elements. They're continually looking at more and more properties. This is fueling their AI. So if they pull the plug on this, they're really hurting themselves in the long run. And I think you made a comment too about, the multimodal tech. Like, so T5 is really what's behind all that. I know a lot of people talk about BERT, but if you read the documentation, it's actually more driven by their T5 algorithm. And it can take unstructured and structured data. But from the way I see it is, if I can give the crawler more structured data, it makes its job easier. It likes its job to be easier because it's going to understand better. It's going to be able to pull more information. Is when I'm using it and I'm linking it to linked open data sources, I'm helping it see those relationships and connections, which I'm going to allow it now to understand faster. And those relationships are actually what are going to enable the multimodal technology between text to video to image to audio. When we start structuring that, because on its surface, those things don't have any meaning to the computer. They only have meaning once they read the tech and the structured data underneath it. So I don't think schema.org is going anywhere anytime soon. Sure, they moved the validator tool over to that, but I think that's the biggest extent of their separation. Other than that, Google's going to continue to validate this stuff in the near future because it's only growing. They're adding more and more all the time. And Google, they don't own it, right? But they have people behind it that are implementing it and putting in best practices. And you can see that when you look at the knowledge base when it comes to the what Google has over there in Google search. So
yeah, I'd make a really good point about the fact that they moved the tool. I think kind of people thought, ooh, that means Google aren't as invested. But in fact, I think what they were doing was people were mistaking their tool for the official schema markup validation tool. And that tool actually only validates what they're interested in for those rich elements that they're giving us. And that moving it to schema markup, the schema.org site, means that it's just actually now officially validating your schema markup. And Andrea, to Doreid, Andrea talks about the carrot, and those rich elements that Google's offering us are the carrot that they're giving us today. Rewards for implementing it. Take the rewards today. Worry about tomorrow. Doreid, have you got one last word to say about the glory and beauty of knowledge graphs and schema markup within a website?
Yeah, one thing that we didn't say that when we build our knowledge graph, we are giving also this open linked data, to the search engine. And this open linked data, it's going to make, apart from a bigger open linked data data set we have in the internet, we have in the web, like Wikidata, like DPpedia, those stuff here. Also, when we are building, our knowledge graph, we are contributing to do the web, and we are making the web better by providing, more information that are accessible by the search engine, and they are helping the user experience for all people on the different search engines.
Brilliant. That's a delightful conclusion. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. Thank you so much, Doreid, for your explanations and your presentations, and thank you, Ryan, for your insights. That was delightful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. See you next time for Kalicube Tuesdays. This is a monthly event with Wordlift, the special edition, once a month, second Tuesday of the month. Geeky topics like schema markup, knowledge graphs, text analysis, text generation, and it's absolutely delightfully geeky. Thank you, Doreid. Thank you, Ryan. I won't give you the song to end this one because, unless you want it.
No, we're good.
Yeah, of course.
Ryan's had enough of the song already, and he's only heard it once. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody.